Zorro, a marca do Z.
He rides a horse, he can use a sword, he can make love to women, he can be Robin Hood. There's like almost nothing wrong with this guy. He's perfect, you know?
Just on a very simple, basic level, it's cool. It's the cool, right? You got the mask, you got the sword, the horse, he always gets the girl, you know, and then Mr. The swords, the costumes, everything about it. I think I spent 4 years of my life running around the house in a bath towel, putting Z's on everything. And, my mother was not amused.
We're always looking for somebody that can eliminate the bad in life and put forward the good. And this is exactly what the character Zorro did.
Well, I think Zorro has an appeal because it lends itself to the everyman aspect of our own wish fulfillment. Zorro's like the original nerdy guy, you know, who's not a real physically strong guy, but he is capable and has skill with the sword and very intelligent, who's sort of like a Renaissance man. And at night, he turns into this avenging do-gooder who helps the poor and the oppressed. So I think there lies the appeal of Zorro.
Zorro.
Quem foi Zorro e de onde ele veio? Nunca existiu um herói de verdade chamado Zorro. E ele não foi um personagem de uma antiga lenda espanhola. Mas o rico e tímido Dom Diego Vega e seu ousado alter ego Zorro surgiram de forma humilde. Foram criados por um simplório jornalista e escritor que vivia em Nova York, chamado Johnston Macaulay.
Well, Zorro began in 1919 in the pulp magazines. Now, you have to understand what pulp magazines are. Before the days of television, before the days of the Republic serials, the great form of popular entertainment was the pulp magazines. You would go to the newsstand for a dime. You would get the beginnings, not the whole story, but the beginning of a story by writers like Johnston Macaulay. Now, let's call them hack writers. And why were they hack writers? They were getting paid a penny a word. Tarzan was created in the pulp magazines as well. And Johnston Macaulay had created quite a number of characters before Zorro, but Zorro somehow caught on him.
A história original de Macaulay fala de Dom Diego Vega, que depois foi mudado para De La Vega, como um espanhol da Califórnia de 24 anos, de família rica e influente. Quando Dom Diego tinha 15 anos, soube que o povo estava sendo perseguido. Foi então que criou sua dupla identidade. Ele fingia não se interessar pelas artes de um cavaleiro, enquanto em segredo praticava montaria e duelo de espada. Segundo a fábula literária, quando ele as dominou, vestiu máscara e capa pretas e se tornou o Zorro.
Zorro was clearly right out of the imaginations of Johnston Macaulay. And frankly, as we have tried to historically put together the background for the character, we came to realize, as we studied real California history, that Johnston Macaulay either knew very little about real California history or cared very little about real California history. And his Los Angeles is sort of like Batman's Gotham City. It's kind of New York, but it's really a fictional place and a fictional milieu.
If there's one thing about the Zorro story that's rather remarkable, it's the absence of California history. He sets it in old California, but he breaks all the rules as far as geography, context, even the plants are all wrong. He has Zorro riding through eucalyptus groves when there weren't any in California at that time and not for many, many years thereafter. The original title of the Zorro stories was The Curse of Capistrano. San Juan Capistrano has nothing to do with Los Angeles. The only reason I think he did it was because curse and Capistrano sounded very good going together, better than perhaps the Curse of Los Angeles.
Não se sabe muito sobre Johnston McCulley, ou o que o levou a criar o Zorro. Para alguns, ele se inspirou no personagem de O Morrião Escarlate. Para outros, apesar do aparente descaso de McCulley com a precisão histórica, Zorro foi baseado em famosos assaltantes da Califórnia do século passado, como Joaquim Marriera ou o menos conhecido Solano Pico.
Solomon Pico often rode at night, struck under the full moon, rode El Camino Real, and especially the further, less well-traveled sections, as Zorro was supposed to do, they left his mark on his victims, living or dead, a road for justice for all in the end. His life, through life, he changed, as we all do, but in the end he defended justice for all people, including against his own people. And again, Zorro did all those.
Was there a character like Zorro in California history? It's an interesting question, and I think like many romantic heroes, there are precedents in other stories or other characters' lives. And when you create a character, you take from the world around you. So if there were influences, or things that you'd heard about something, you take a characteristic from here, you take a setting from there, and you create a world, and that's what I think he did.
Ao criar seu mundo fictício, Johnston McCulley também incorporou várias épocas diferentes.
Got the haciendas and the missions. Well, the haciendas and the missions never coexisted. You've got the Presidio of Los Angeles. Well, there was no Presidio in Los Angeles. The Presidio was in San Francisco and another one in Monterey. It's this kind of thing, and so sometimes we've tried to say, well, what year did Zorro really take place? And we've scratched our heads and come up with a compromise. We call it 1820, but from Johnston McCulley's writings, it's really impossible to make a determination.
I think it probably was around 1820. It's really amorphous. It was at essentially the beginnings of the Rancho period. The missions were at pretty much their height. The last of the famous 21 missions was created in 1823. And the missions by that time were fairly successful in terms of what they were doing in their economy, mission agriculture. By 1822, California is a province of Mexico, so within about that 4-year time frame between the end of Spanish rule and the beginning of Mexican California.
O único fato que ficou claro foi que em 1919 a história de Zorro chamou a atenção dos leitores do gênero, que pagavam 10 centavos por semana para ver como terminaria a maldição de Capistrano. No capítulo final, Zorro revela a todos que ele é Dom Diego e declara que Zorro não cavalgará mais. A história de Zorro teria terminado com essa declaração, se não fosse por um herói de Hollywood determinado a fazer com que Zorro cavalgasse novamente. Em 1920, Warren G. Harding foi eleito presidente. A lei seca começou e o astro do cinema Douglas Fairbanks se casou com a namoradinha da América, Mary Pickford. Nesse mesmo ano, Fairbanks produziu e estrelou o primeiro filme do Zorro, A Marca do Zorro.
I think the way that Douglas Fairbanks found Johnston McCulley's first book and used that and transitioned that into film is one of the romantic stories that sort of fits with the character of Zorro, because apparently right after he and Mary Pickford got married and went on their honeymoon, he had found this book and he took it on their honeymoon and he read it and he loved it and he came back and he made the movie, and it was the first film that they produced at their studio.
Não é de se admirar que a história sobre como Fairbanks conheceu Zorro seja tão romântica como uma aventura de Zorro. Mas nem todos se lembram dela do mesmo modo.
Well, the story goes as far as I can remember, that the story was brought to him by a friend of the family who also was an agent, literary agent, called Ruth Allen, who read it in a pulp magazine and suggested that it might be adapted as a possible vehicle for my father. That's the way I remembered it.
the way Zorro made a transition from the pulps to the silver screen is because Douglas Fairbanks picked up on it immediately and said, "Oh my God, this is just the kind of swashbuckling adventure which would be perfect for me," and immediately acquired the rights. And in those days, things happened very quickly. And within months of Zorro hitting the newsstand for the very first time, Douglas Fairbanks was on the set shooting his version of it.
He was a very inventive person, and so I'm sure what he saw in Zorro was not so much what was on the page as what it could become on film. He was looking for some kind of action picture to make a break from drawing room comedies, romantic sort of stuff, and so this was his first action vehicle, and he probably saw in it what he could turn it into: the acrobatics, the lively laughter, the sword play, the carving of the Z's.
Well, maybe Zorro was the perfect vehicle for him rather than he for Zorro, because, well, who else was there at the time or even now who had the ability to act properly a character part where you played really two parts, dual role in a way, and still be so athletic and so almost like his athletics were more like a dancer, like a ballet dancer, more than just stunts as such, and they worked out with such detail in advance and practice on so much. Well, there just wasn't anybody else before or since who could be so versatile, I guess.
Douglas Fairbanks pretty much invented the Zorro that we know: the dark costume, the mask, carving the Z's, and the secret hideaway in the house, the clock for going down into the subterranean cavern. All those kind of features that we associate with the Zorro character. And then what he did with Don Diego, playing Don Diego as a fop. In the Curse of Capistrano, Don Diego was kind of a dandy or a fop, but Fairbanks pushed it a little bit to the effeminate side, and that was his invention.
Parecia que o filme seria um fracasso quando o público reagiu mal a uma pré-estreia. Mas a marca do Zorro deixaria sua marca no mundo. Apesar do pouco entusiasmo na pré-estreia, a marca do Zorro estreou em 1920 e foi um sucesso instantâneo.
The energy, the excitement, all the acrobatic stuff he could do, and this laugh. You see, Douglas Fairbanks would give a throwing back his head, taunting, ha ha ha, kind of laugh, and that caught on with kids, and it caught on with the female audience. It made it a really popular movie, and it's lasted all these years because he does somersaults, flips, leaps from the ground onto a mantelpiece. He was the first action hero.
At star quality, you could play any part. Plus you have a man who not only is a fine actor, but also a fine athlete, and very exciting to watch him do these stunts.
He was an athlete, he had physical prowess, but he needed a little help from Hollywood. Okay, so he did have special trampolines set up out of camera range where he could jump up on the verandas of the senoritas when he's escaping from the bad guys, He had stuntmen to assist him on certain things. So yes, he did most of it himself, okay, but he did have a little help from Hollywood.
He'd throw in all these magic tricks to try and show us that, when he was Don Diego, it was still the same clever guy, keep the audience going with that character so the audience wouldn't lose it when they were watching Don Diego.
People ask why my father thought of putting magic tricks into the character. I think myself, distance and time, is because he liked doing it in real life. He liked doing magic tricks. He liked picking up little gags and tricks and playing them out at dinner parties or just talking to somebody in his office or whatever. He always had some little trick in his pocket or that he heard about or read about or had seen. Never quite grew up. He was sort of a Peter Pan.